So you've identified your passion and you're ready to launch your own business. But what are the legal implications? I think you're really going to enjoy this show and learn about what every fledgling entrepreneur should be thinking about. I'm MaryLynn Schiavi, and welcome to Pro Se Nation. This year, Entrepreneur.com named him one of the hot 30 movers and shakers of New York City's startup scene. Joining us today is Mukesh Patel, a serial entrepreneur, business attorney, and a private equity principal. He established Juice Tank in 2012, a tech startup incubator and co-working space in Somerset, New Jersey, and Icespiration, a venture accelerator. Mukesh advises and provides training to entrepreneurs, for-profit and non-profit businesses, educational institutions, and individuals. He is an adjunct professor at Rutgers Business School, where he teaches a groundbreaking experiential and interdisciplinary course called ICE, which stands for Innovation, Creativity, and Entrepreneurship. Welcome.
Thank you, MaryLynn. Pleasure to be here.
I've often wondered what the legal implications are of crowdfunding, whether it's using Kickstarter or Indiegogo. Once you start promising people, their tchotchkes or their gifts, and what if you don't deliver on it? Are there any legal issues around crowdfunding, general crowdfunding right now?
Well, crowdfunding right now is really more like crowdsourcing,
Okay.
and crowdfunding capital is a component of crowdsourcing.
Okay.
The SEC regulations and the laws from the 1933 era for 80 plus years have really not been materially changed until just recently with the Jobs Act and the crowdfunding laws. Currently, there is no legal equity crowdfunding. So essentially, if you go on Kickstarter or Indiegogo or Rocket Hub or any of these platforms, entrepreneurs are raising capital in the forms of gifts and in return perhaps giving perks or a sample product. And a lot of entrepreneurs use crowdfunding as a technique for pre-sales. So as long as there's no equity changing hands for that capital.
Right. So they're not actually investing in your business.
Correct.
They
correct.
don't own a piece of it. Right.
Right. There's no interest of your company that's really being exchanged for the capital.
Mm-hmm.
However, that's on the horizon. And but Congress has not finished all the regulations that involves equity crowdfunding. Okay. And just recently this year, after several years of delay, they did come out with some aspect of it, but it really deals with more of a mini IPO and substantial capital. But on the level of entrepreneurs and micro capital, let's call it under $1 million perhaps, those regulations are yet to come. And when they do, I think equity crowdfunding in general, I think, is a phenomenal concept.
This to some extent levels the playing field. It makes it more accessible to the average entrepreneur
And the investor.
Okay.
Because historically, general solicitation was not permitted to find investors. You had to really limit it to the people you're connected to and have some meaningful relationship with, or a business relationship.
And these are the SEC rules,
Right.
Securities and Exchange Commission rules from the 1930s.
Correct.
Okay.
Even things like...
it is about time the laws catch up with the current economy,
absolutely,
right?
because business is generations ahead of where the law is. And law needs to really catch up
Right.
if the U.S. is to be competitive globally.
What are the three biggest mistakes that new entrepreneurs make with regard to legal issues?
I would say the first one is issue mapping. And what I mean by issue mapping is basically taking a 10,000 foot view of all the potential legal landmines and scope of legal issues, and really understanding from incorporating to corporate structures to protecting intellectual property to relationships and agreements that cover those kind of relationships and transactions, avoiding litigation, risk mitigation, all sorts of things. It's really understanding the broader horizon of legal issues. And most entrepreneurs, either because they don't have the experience, especially if they're first timers, or if they're solopreneurs without a team where they can delegate the issue mapping to other people on their team who may have experience. Issue mapping is a critical point or a critical aspect of entrepreneurship that can help avoid and protect, avoid exposure to risk and protect the entrepreneurs and their ventures.
And that seems like an opportunity or maybe a point where even if an entrepreneur cannot afford an attorney or they don't think that they can afford an attorney, maybe that's a point where they just check in with an attorney to have them, him or her, sort of help them map it out, right?
Correct, yes. So attorneys can help. Also, very experienced serial entrepreneurs can provide similar kind of guidance as to all the issues they've gone through in their journey and lessons learned and what they would do differently, subsequently. And so there's numerous sources, but yes, a consultation with an experienced attorney in the space that they're in to help them with issue mapping and kind of developing or designing a roadmap of legal issues can be very helpful and instrumental. Second would be sourcing and assessing their legal counsel, their attorney. All lawyers are not created equal, and there's a huge spectrum of, there's a lot of good lawyers out there, but there's also...
And I think in New Jersey there's 75,000.
It's one of the most dense lawyers per square foot or per square, per capita, I think. Attorneys that have a business background tend to provide a little bit more well-rounded advice and a multidimensional or multidisciplinary perspective on legal issues that cross and fuse with business issues. It's not crystal clear all the time. And even if it is...
And in so many industries, the landscape is changing beneath our feet, right?
Correct. It's a very fast, business at the speed of light or thought, as the saying goes. And I'd say that just because an attorney is credentialed legally does not mean that he or she is the best person for that type of business or venture or even stage of business. Some attorneys have a better grasp of legal issues and solutions for early stage companies versus growth ventures, or some are more versed in larger corporate settings and not so much the startup environment. And so it helps to find the right attorney or firm based on where that entrepreneur is in their life cycle of their business venture. Life cycle, space, are they mostly technology? Are they software, hardware? Are they enterprise or consumer level? Is it a digital enterprise? Is it a traditional business, small business? Is it a mom and pop type of retail outfit? Is it a service business or a professional business? And it really makes a difference if your attorney is versed in that industry, space, size, business cycle level, and maybe even geographically. It could make a difference. The other thing that's important on that issue is checking references. Many entrepreneurs will just ask a friend, or they happen to meet an attorney, and it's the single point of reference, sometimes no point of reference. Just because their family or someone they know have used them, they just go with that. And it's important to actually ask for numerous points of references and ask the entrepreneur who retained that attorney in the past. If you were to do it all over again, would you choose the same attorney? Why or why not? Or who else have you worked with that you would recommend perhaps more for my situation?
So you should definitely shop around.
Shop around, not only from a cost perspective, but really from an experience and advice, quality of advice.
And probably even communication style, right?
Yes. Communication style. A lot of attorneys have egos, and they all want to bang their chest as to who's the loudest or the most aggressive or
Right.
comes across as the most knowledgeable in front of their peers or colleagues. And that can get dangerous because if that's not aligned properly, then it can ruin a transaction. It can halt the negotiations, and it has nothing to do with the entrepreneur. The attorney just basically derailed the progress that could have been made,
Right.
or
Right.
didn't unleash the potential, but rather curbed it through their personalities. It can also, is the attorney likable? A likable representative goes a long way.
Right.
Even
Right.
the other, your adversary on the business side will say, "Hey, I really enjoyed working with your attorney, and you made the transaction or relationship flawless
Right.
and a meaningful relationship." And the attorney listened and provided advice for the venture, and not just because he or she is trying to be more on the ego side.
Right.
Attorneys have an obligation to zealously represent their clients,
Right.
but they should also be careful where zealous meets likability or integrity and or rationality. They should also be rational. And there's so many that lose their civility or rational behaviors, as clients do as well.
Right.
But I think
Right.
it takes that combined alliance.
Now, what about using one of our last show or a previous show was focused on mediation? Would it ever make sense to use a mediator in a situation, in early negotiations?
It can be useful, and a lot of times bringing on a experienced business person to help negotiate the business terms, perhaps, or advise each business party on the side in the form of a private caucus as a mentor or advisor can also help. And a lot of times, even attorneys that represent me or my partners or ventures will say, "Why don't you personally just take care of the business negotiations, then come to us, the lawyers, at the right time, so that we're not
Right.
really meddling on a lot of the business issues, but we can help solve some of the legal issues."
Right.
So that can make a difference. But it helps to have that attorney to flag and identify legal issues well before they come up,
Right.
so that you can be proactive in negotiations as opposed to reactive. That now there's a problem, and how do we solve it? Because now the momentum is a little bit more negative, or can get adverse, and you want to avoid that if possible,
Right.
and keep it on a positive level. The other point about sourcing and assessing the right attorney is also what kind of intros and connections can that attorney make for the client.
Right.
I found that the most valuable services that I've gotten from some of my attorneys in our law firms are the introductions they make to
Wow.
joint venture partners, customers, investors, even employees, senior executives, co-founders, introductions to even that.
Now,
Introductions
that's
to,
something a lot of people wouldn't think about,
right,
right?
right.
You would just think the lawyer's there just for the legal
Yeah.
issues, right?
And
Not their web of relationships.
and those
That's-
and lawyers tend to have a lot of great relationships,
Yeah.
or a pretty extensive Rolodex, if you will. And if they're willing to leverage that for their clients, to help clients grow and expand and surround themselves with really smart people that the attorneys have worked with in the past or have known. So they're kind of passing that first filter of good quality people that they're making
Right.
introductions to. It can even be
That makes
angel
sense.
investors or venture capital firms. In fact, most VC firms typically want an introduction only through some gatekeepers.
Right.
And attorneys are typically thought about as gatekeepers to investors and large corporate clients, because
Okay.
they shouldn't be making introductions to everyone.
Right.
They should really filter that and make quality introductions and connections. So that's another important part about how to assess the attorney of the
Okay.
law firm. Also, how does the law firm allocate their work between experienced partners and junior level associates. It's a delicate balance between a higher hourly rate with an experienced attorney who can probably get the job done in a shorter period of time, but at a higher clock rate, versus an associate who may be learning on your clock, on your dime, may take longer, but the hourly rate is lower. And you want to balance that to make sure that even if a junior level associate attorney is working on your matter, that a more senior person can take a very quick glance at the work product to make sure that that experience is also incorporated.
Now, what is, well, and we'll get to cost more in depth later, but what is there sort of a ballpark, an average that, you know, an entrepreneur, I have a 15-year-old cousin who's ready to start his own software company or IT company. Is there an average that this type of lawyer is charging to help the new entrepreneur?
Well, if you take the traditional billing model and the billing practice, attorneys tend to quote hourly rates for partners, junior partners, senior associates, mid-level associates, etc. And those rates can range depending on experience. Junior associates can range anywhere from $150 an hour to $250 an hour. And it can even be broader than that. I'm just giving you maybe a certain middle range quartile, perhaps. And then partners can go anywhere from $250 an hour all the way to $1,000 an hour. And it really depends on the specialty, what type of transaction or litigation issue there is. And so there's no average number that I would recommend to really look at. I would say if you find an attorney that lots of other clients will gladly say he or she is one of the best attorneys I've ever had, is very flexible attorney in terms of cost structures, not so rigid in a pure hourly rate, but perhaps for some transactions may be willing to quote a hybrid arrangement where it's a fixed rate per transaction, or they may defer fees until you get your funding, perhaps. And they'll make it up once you have funding and more resources to allocate towards your legal services. Or they may give you more time to pay it off in some sort of a monthly retainer type of arrangement. Those things can calculate more into the ultimate best outcome than a purely what is the right hourly rate or dollar amount. Because an attorney who charges $500 an hour may be able to handle a matter for you in a couple of hours. And so you may end up spending a few $1,000s at the early stage. An attorney who may quote you a lower hourly rate could literally spend so much time that it ends up costing you $10,000 to $25,000. And so it's very complex, and it's really, I think, unfair for early stage entrepreneurs, because very few attorneys have figured out how to make it a fair level playing field in terms of fee structures and creative structures. And so I have at any given moment in time about 5 law firms that represent my ventures and represent me, and each one has a different specialty. So even though it may be a large firm with, let's say, 300 attorneys or more, and they have every single legal department that you can think about, from corporate to technology to startups to healthcare or whatever it may be, business transactions to litigation, I don't play all my cards with one firm. I try to leverage numerous relationships and different expertise and different hourly rates, and so it's a complex matrix, but I found a lot of value in doing that.
So do you have all your lawyers on speed dial, or what?
Yeah, they're all on speed dial.
Have you built a matrix? I mean,
a
visual matrix?
I have a visual matrix. It's and I share it with a lot of entrepreneurs to help them think through how to find their own lawyers and law firms that, as they grow and expand for different areas of practice and different specialties. because the deeper the knowledge and the insights and the experience, the more value you'll get. But you have to negotiate the hourly rates as well, or hybrid rates or other arrangements. One more comment would be, how much work does an entrepreneur do, pro se, in-house with their business team or layperson team, versus how much do they start engaging lawyers to do?
Right.
And while there's no simple answer, I think the more versed they are in the first 2 points that I mentioned, the easier that third point becomes of how much they can do on their own,
Right.
in terms of legal forms or assistance from business colleagues, et cetera, and how much they should really engage attorneys to help them. Because if you let attorneys do everything from A to Z, the early stage entrepreneur may not have any funds left to actually do the
Right.
business.
Right.
But it shouldn't be zero allocated to the lawyers as well.
There's also, in a previous interview, you had enlightened me to something called a B corporation or a benefit corporation. The B corporation seems to be somewhere kind of the best of both worlds. Can you tell us about that?
Sure. So most states now have legislation that allows a B corporation to exist as a form of entity. Like you mentioned, there was the nonprofit world and the for-profit world.
Right.
And in my opinion, I think the major difference between the two is really the tax code.
Right.
Because even nonprofits or not-for-profits have revenues and revenue sources, and they have expenses, and therefore the difference being profit. But it's just a matter of how that net is treated from a tax perspective or tax code, and can it be distributed? Can you use profits, interest to bring in equity partners or investors? Can you give warrants or stocks in a company to attract talent? All those tend to be the differences between the two forms of entities. But from an entrepreneurial perspective, I call nonprofits or the large corporate world entrepreneurship, which is really entrepreneurship within conventional organizations. And B corporations are a fusion of perhaps the best of both, that allows you to have a social innovation venture that can be for profit, but also serve the mission and purposes of social entrepreneurship. And just recently, I believe the first company to go public as a B corporation is Etsy. If you remember, Etsy was founded by a founder that wanted to create a wooden computer, and then it turned it into an interesting arts and crafts-based company on the web.
Well, I think and correct me if I'm wrong, I thought the most interesting aspect of the B corporation is that it can have, it doesn't have to have just profit as its motive. It can sort of have a higher, loftier vision.
Sure.
And the shareholders have to be okay with that. I don't know.
Yes. I mean, the theme and the intent is that all your stakeholders, whether they are, the planet, society, investors, shareholders, all have a bigger purpose for that venture. So it's, triple bottom line is one way to look at it, where it's not just the financial or monetary profit, but it's also, do you have a mission to do good in this world?
Right.
Every company should have a mission to do good in this world.
Right.
But that kind of really puts it in a more concrete
it's more
platform.
Official, it's more formalized.
Correct.
Well, that's a perfect segue to my last two questions. And one is, why do you love what you do? And the other is, what do you want your legacy to be? What do you want to leave to the world?
Well, why do I love what I do? How can I not? I mean, I wake up each morning with an opportunity to work with some of the brightest minds in terms of entrepreneurs or technologists, creatives, and professionals in going through ideation, coming up with creative ideas for new businesses and ventures. I get an opportunity to give feedback and advise and help entrepreneurs. And on the nonprofit side and the large corporations or educational institutions, I get to help them from an entrepreneurship perspective in terms of coaching and advising. I get to invest. So I spent a decade or more in the private equity space investing in entrepreneurs and as an angel investor. And I get to create tons of strategic partnerships and joint ventures and launch new companies and products and meet new people all the time. It's bigger than being a kid in a candy store.
Yeah.
It's really merging passion with purpose, with experience, and you get to push that comfort zone. I really get to experiment and break out of that comfort zone almost on a daily basis. And
your
it's
legacy?
so fulfilling. Legacy, I would hope that there's an appreciation, or at least an acknowledgement that I have created a positive impact for thousands of people. And I think entrepreneurship is a vehicle that can really be broad-reaching, where you can make tremendous impact on people and on the world. So I love the saying, entrepreneurs go change the world, because they in fact do.
Yeah.
And a little bit of that. I'm humbled to be in a situation where I can help so many entrepreneurs, and I love building companies. I'm a business builder, and so if the legacy is a little bit of, he used that vehicle of entrepreneurship to create a positive impact on the world and on people. There's nothing better, in my opinion.
And I bet one of your favorite, I think it's up on your wall at Juice Tank, Walt Disney's "It's kind of fun trying to do the impossible."
Yeah.
I think I turned that around, but it's a dyslexic version of Walt Disney saying. Well, thank you so much.
Thank you so much, MaryLynn. My pleasure. It was an honor to be here.
Well, thanks for joining us for ProSay Nation. If you'd like more information, please go to our website at prosaynation.org. I'm MaryLynn Schiavi, and see you in the future.